welcome everybody. My name is Michelle. I work at the University Y. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors that Casey just put in the chat. Thank you. I got really accustomed to reading those off every week, but it's a lofty list and we're super grateful to our sponsors who help make this series possible. So thank you. This series is about taking a step back during an election year and thinking about the state of our democracy broadly and the movements of this moment and how people have been engaging. And so we are very excited to have Chibundo speaking at this Friday forum. So Chibundo Egwuatu is a graduate student in sociocultural anthropology at UIUC and a member of the Champaign County Bailout Coalition. Chibundo's research interests are on the activism of Black sex workers, decriminalization, and decarceration and digital space. So thank you, Chibundo, so much for being here and talking to us today. With that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Hi, everybody. I'm going to just put up my slideshow now. Okay. All right. Is that visible? Well, you can't respond, but yeah, thanks. So my name's Chibundo Egwuatu, and I'm a member of the Champaign County Bailout Coalition. This is our new logo designed by Elizabeth Horn in the art department, so thanks for that one. So who are we? So the Champaign County Bailout Coalition, we are a nonprofit, meaning that we do not make a profit, not so much that we have a 501c3 affiliation or designation, excuse me. So we're a nonprofit and volunteer-run alliance of individuals and organizations committed to the abolition of money bail as a criterion for determining pretrial release in Champaign County. So this mission statement here, not so much a mission statement, but just a general overview of who we are and what we do. It's pretty specific, but later in the presentation, we'll get into some of the more bigger ideas around money bail and even jailing statistics and so on and so forth in Champaign County. Okay, so here are a couple of our affiliations. So we have been working with a lot of folks in coalition around the Pretrial Fairness Act, which I'll also talk about later in this presentation. And we've participated in the Illinois Supreme Court Commission. Don't have any pictures about that today, but if you're interested, they're on our Facebook. But we're members of the Coalition to End Money Bond and the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice. So the Coalition to End Money Bond is a bit bigger. But the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice, of course, is Illinois specific. So these are groups that are also doing bailout work and other types of work, perhaps lobbying, legal advocacy, so on and so forth, in order to work towards the end of money bond. Furthermore, we also collaborate with the Believers Bailout. So along with the Cook County or Chicago Community Bail Fund, the Believers Bailout were a big part of us actually starting this group here in Champaign County. So we are just incredibly grateful to all the work they've done with us and what that collaboration has brought forth. Okay, so here are our three main problems with money bail as a concept. We'll get into maybe some of the minutia of how money bail works if you're unfamiliar with it in the next slide. But bail, of course, criminalizes poverty, right? So if you're being granted bail, that means that the judge has decided that you're not a danger to public safety, which is the only reason you would be able to bail yourself out in the first place. So if you're not familiar with it, judges actually reserve the right to not grant somebody bail. Of course, that's a much more complicated legal scenario. They have to explain why they think someone shouldn't have bail and so on and so forth. But with bail, especially if you're poor, and since bail's not set at a rate that most folks can afford, or more poor folks can afford, you're being de facto held pre-trial without really any kind of way to escape that. Two, it defunds Black communities. Going back to this discussion of bail not being set at rates most folks can afford, who are actually being arrested. of course, that's disproportionately Black and brown folks who are being arrested. And the fact that people have to come together, family, community networks, to bail out their friends and family and their loved ones means that that's money that could go to schooling, that's money that can go to a car note, that's money that can go to building a future for themselves. That's now going to the state. And of course, bail, again, if you don't know, you get a bail before you've been charged sometimes. But even if you've never been, before you're convicted, basically is what I'm trying to say. So you're not convicted of a crime. That means you have not been tried in front of your peers that have said that you have done a crime, but you're being held for bail, and you're being held pre-trial before you even get that fair trial. So that's a big issue, obviously, because if you have just been accused of a crime, why should you have to pay sometimes like thousands of dollars in order to get your freedom? The last part, of course, is that bail disproportionately impacts folks with marginalized genders and or sexualities, folks with disabilities, folks with dependents, folks who are dependent on somebody, and so on and so forth. So precarity and being entangled within the criminal justice system is a relationship we've seen quite a bit over time. But I'm gonna just go to the next slide and get into it a bit more there. So we believe that high bond disrupts the lives of those unable to pay them, that it destabilizes precarious housing, it leads to unemployment, and it separates families. We believe that jail is the worst place someone could be. So here are some more specific problems with bail. So bail, number one, is arbitrary and discretionary. So arbitrary means that it's not like theft, for instance. For theft, you have to get this amount of bail. The judge gets to decide how much bail someone should or shouldn't get. And of course, it's discretionary, meaning that the judge themselves gets to decide. So not connected to anything real, quote unquote, and completely based off of the judge's judgment, which is not necessarily a problem because, of course, some folks can get accused of certain things and even charged of certain things, and the judge might see that this is something they couldn't afford to pay and put a bail lower. But of course, our issue is the fact that it also allows them to do the converse, which is put really high bails on someone's freedom, and then those people can be languishing in jail until their court date, which could be months in the future. So another reason is health concerns. So there are plenty of health concerns that are not necessarily attended to in jail, or at least not attended to sufficiently in jail. So during COVID-19, when the pandemic started, CCBC did a car rally to decarcerate for public safety due to the fact that we had not heard any plans from the county jail, the sheriff's department, anyone in the criminal justice system, even the circuit clerk, about what they were going to do about the fact that the jail is literally keeping people in close quarters during a pandemic. Didn't hear about whether or not, what about folks who get arrested, put in jail, might already have COVID? Are they being treated properly? Not even thinking about them as being able to infect other people, but that fact that they're managing an illness, which goes to the next point, which is medication in jail. So if you get arrested and you have asthma or a chronic health condition, it's very difficult to actually get your medication. That's also a discretionary thing. You might go to the jail, like you might try to get your friend or your loved one some medication in the jail and they just won't let you give it to them. That's something that happens quite a bit. Of course, if you're older, this could be a problem as well. There's not a lot of accessibility in a lot of jails. I know, at least in Champaign County, that has been an issue about the lack of ADA compliance in our own jail. And of course, lastly, at least for this list, there are many other things that can be a concern health-wise, such as pregnancy or recent injuries and so on and so forth. But disability, of course, is not seen as a priority issue to think about for people who get arrested and interned in jail systems, period. So the assumption of money bail is also that it would ensure that people show up to court. So you gave this certain amount of money, which means that if you want to get it back, because that's what bail is supposed to be, once you show up to court, you get your money back. We've seen that this is false. There are several citations about it, and if you're curious about it, give us an email and we could send you some of those. But you could just search, go to theappeal.com. They have a really great article about disproving the assumptions of bail and bail statistics. But there has been no proof that someone getting granted bail would actually mean they won't show up, that someone not paying bail means that they won't show up to court. In fact, it seems like the reason people tend to not show up to court are really simple, like they forgot, which is, of course, you're not constantly thinking about that and putting that at the top of your head. You might forget, you might oversleep, your kid might get sick, your transportation might get messed up, or you could even just be late. But if you're late, the judge doesn't have to see you. So there are plenty of reasons that people might not show up to court that aren't, them absconding from the law or running away, right? In fact, other states have seen that to make sure people show up to court, it's actually better to give them text reminders and or to provide transportation and childcare. So these things are actually more important for people showing up to court than having them held pretrial. If you're charged, even if you're not charged or convicted of a crime, you will still have a criminal record that is public. And of course, as you might be familiar with, you could get those expunged or sealed, but they're expensive. I think in Illinois, just to do the paperwork, it's a minimum of $120. And then of course, you need a lawyer to help you go through that paperwork and figure out this whole process, which could be quite lengthy and time consuming. And I don't know, even for an uncomplicated case, that could be like a good $500. So there's over $600 off the bat to get your record expunged that might not end in you actually getting your record expunged. This, of course, is still an issue with things that have been decriminalized, right? So folks who might have been arrested for cannabis-related charges that are no longer criminal charges still have to get their records expunged and still have to go through this really time-consuming and expensive process to do that. And this is all happening before you are seen in a trial, and perhaps even if you're seen before like a jury of your peers. So this is all before you've actually been, like the state has decided you've actually done something wrong. This is just basically off of the accusation of a police officer. So this is a pretty serious thing for a lot of people. And lastly, fines and fees. So these defund communities as well. So when you pay bail, you technically get all that money back, but the court takes out automatically fines and fees related to your case, right? So that's money that even if you get cleared of everything, everything's expunged and sealed, that money is still never coming back to you. So it's a bit of a racket. In Champaign County alone, or at least specifically here, the circuit clerk's office is funded primarily through funds and fees taken from incarcerated community members. So if you look at the county budget, especially city by city, Champaign and Urbana, all of that money is going straight into sustaining the system that creates the issue and so on and so forth. So there's obviously some weird stuff going on there politically. So this is a little sheet, a little one-pager that was done by the done by a local group, Build Programs Not Jails, in 2015. Not sure if there's more recent data on this because all of this information was collected through volunteer efforts. So volunteers going to the county jail website every day and just collecting information about who's getting arrested, how long are they staying there, so on and so forth, right? I don't believe the county actually has this data in a way that you can just see it like this, which is, of course, also a problem that the bill I'm going to talk about later, the Pretrial Fairness Act, does want to address. The fact that a lot of county jails, especially smaller counties, do not actually have a lot of data on who's going to the jail, how long they're being kept, what's happening with them, that's accessible to even them themselves. They're just not collecting it in that way, but of course not accessible to the public. So there are certain questions that cannot be answered. And however that came to be, that is a problem for seeking justice for folks. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is specifically these little people here that you see. So our county population of Black folks is 13%, yet the jail system at that time, it was 72%. So there's a huge overrepresentation of Black people in the Champaign County Jail, which is why we say that bail is defunding Black communities specifically in Champaign County. Okay, so here's some information about the bail fund itself. So the bail fund is funded by community donations. So that's where we get all of our money, is our donation link. People donating money to us and that's it. We don't have any money that comes from any kind of an institution. We have been applying for grants more recently, though, so hopefully to supplement community donations, but it's all crowdfunded, basically. Right now, we pay up to $1,000 for individuals unable to cover their court-imposed bonds. So from those donations, someone can call our organization, ask for themselves or a loved one to be bailed out, and we will say that we will contribute up to $1,000, but that will also include just the minor fees. So another thing, if you go to the jail to bail someone out and their bail is for, let's say, $10,000, you only have to pay 10% on that in most cases. And once you pay that 10%, you still have a fee. There's still an administrative fee that comes with that. I believe it's $34 in Champaign County. So we'll pay $1,000 and then add on to that the $34 for the processing fee that the sheriff's department, that the jail charges. So of course, for a lot of folks, that could be totally fine that their bails are underneath $1,000 and would cover the whole thing. But some folks, we might do things like working with family members and friends for them to basically raise the rest, and we bring the $1,000 plus that $34 fee to the jail together and bail out their friend or loved one. Of course, it also revolves this bail fund, and that's something a lot of bail funds do. Since once a person goes to court, their bond is returned to them. Since we bailed them out, the bond is returned to us. So we could use that money to bail out another person. The only times bails are forfeit, or I forgot the other term, but forfeit basically, is when someone doesn't show up. And of course, there are many reasons people don't show up to court. So we don't really, that's an issue in and of itself. Or if someone gets released on their own recognizance and get picked up for another charge while they're out and about. I don't want to say get picked up for another crime, because again, this is before you're being seen by a jury. This is just the fact that there might be a crime that happened here, right? And lastly, the bail fund is a stopgap. So we don't want to do this forever. We're trying, a lot of our efforts right now is to abolish the need for bail funds, period, right? People should not have to cough up money in order to get their freedom. Freedom is not something that should be, I want to say like it should be unfree, but that's like a little redundant, but you get what I'm trying to say. Moving on to the next slide. This is a little one-pager from the Coalition to End Money Bonds website about the Pretrial Fairness Act. So as you see, it does not have a bill number because it doesn't quite exist yet. But this is an idea that a lot of folks who've been working to end money bond in Illinois specifically have been thinking about. So the basics is that this is an act that will end the use of money bond. Of course, there's a lot of specifics. If you'd like to get into specifics, we could help, of course, but I would definitely suggest you contact the Coalition to End Money Bond themselves, because they actually have lawyers and people who work in Springfield that could probably explain this a bit better than we can. But if you look to the right page, the right of the page, these are the four main things that this bill will do. So one, of course, prohibit the use of money bond. It's not that no one will ever be able to be held pre-trial, but just money bond. The judge still reserves the right to hold people without bond if they so choose. However, now they have to explain why. And that has to be a legally defensible reason that they're holding someone without bail, rather than de facto holding someone or incarcerating somebody just because they can't afford something. So the idea of bail is that you set someone gets a bail, and that means if they have an option, they have a way to get free, right? But it's a false option if you're poor. That's the whole idea. Secondly, maintains public safety and judicial discretion without using money. So this idea is basically that if the court really thinks that someone's going to flee or harm somebody, again, they can hold someone pre-trial if they want to, but that shouldn't be dependent on money. And this is a question we get a lot, right? Is if you want to destroy money bail, what about folks who do things violently, right? And then won't be held pre-trial if something happens, won't be separated from a situation in which they can like do something else violent. Of course, we're a coalition of folks, so people have different ideas, but the bottom line is that none of the things that we're working towards currently would ever stop a judge from holding someone pretrial if they really thought they were a danger to a community. But they do have to express why they think someone's a danger of the community. So that, we hope, of course, would cut down on things like racial profiling, right? You can't just say, this person looks shady and I don't want them out and about. You have to say what they did, what's the evidence, why are you actually thinking about these things? Next, it will improve system efficiency. So this is another thing that, for instance, the way the system works right now actually doesn't give law enforcement a lot of latitudes to make a decision that's outside of a carceral and punitive decision about someone that they pick up along the way. So, for instance, notice to appear. If you get a notice to appear and you sleep through your court date, you now automatically have a warrant. That's a crime, and that's very serious. You get picked up for something else, you're going to jail, right? But now with this thing, it would allow judges to be like, you know what, I'm not going to put out a warrant for your arrest. We're going to reschedule the court date, and we're going to do some text reminders, which of course we see as a much lower and less punitive intervention into someone getting a fair trial, other than, you know, basically making them even further criminalized before they've been charged or convicted of their first crime. And the lastly was the thing I was talking about, was increasing government transparency and accountability. So this whole issue about the fact that a lot of jails may not be collecting data at all about what's happening there. And if they are, there's not really a widely used metric about what they collect. So they might be collecting information in different ways in different places, which would make it kind of useless to look at as activists, as researchers, as law professionals, as people who just care in a non-professional sense, to look at that data and really understand what's happening to people within our own communities and within our country. So this is the act, and this is something we're working on. And if you want to know more and get involved, please, please, please follow the Coalition to End Money Bond and definitely get added to the listserv. Okay, so back to CCBC specifically. So here are the principles of our practice. One is direct action. So this bail work we're doing is a direct action project, meaning we are getting money from community members. Community members are volunteering to bail out other community members, and that's it. You know, very immediate and somewhat simple way to address the criminalization of poor folks, of people of color, and so on and so forth in our community, is to literally just bail them out and crowdfund that, collect it. Next is consent. So by this we mean that, so if you go to the sheriff website, you can just look at who's in jail right now, see how much their bail is, go to the jail and bail them out and disappear. You could do that if you want, but we don't do that. We usually get in contact with friends or family on the outside first. So if someone in jail is like, I need to get bailed out, they can call us, or they could have someone on the outside call us, which might be better because we could stay in contact with someone on the outside a bit easier than with someone in jail. But yeah, friends or family have to consent. We communicate with friends and family before we carry out the bails. So of course we could provide rides, but if they have a friend or family member, we'd much rather them go home with their friends or family members. We try to make sure that we're basically seeing to their needs as human beings who are interned in a cage for some time and need that real social interaction with someone they love and care about and trust when they come out. Amongst other things, when people come out, we might help them with a phone call, charging their phones if they have a phone that they came in with, you know, calling an Uber if they'd rather not go into a car with someone they don't know, you know, and sometimes even giving goodie bags of little snacks and things that they could just eat quickly while they come out. And we're working with some other organizations in the Champaign County community to see if we could also, for folks who may not have a place to go, but obviously don't want to stay in jail, to see if we could get like a hotel room for them for a day or two to help them figure things out, take a shower and sleep on it before they deal with what it means to be on the outside after being in jail for so long. Mutual aid, of course, this is both a direct action and a mutual aid project. We are only working with community members, and we're all community members. And lastly, we're leaderless and voluntary. So no one's getting paid to do this work. People are just volunteering their time and their resources to continue this project. Okay, so here are some ways that you can get involved if you have some time and resources you'd like to contribute as well. So CCBC, we are organized around decentralized and intersecting working groups that collectively focus on individual projects between meetings. So depending on your interests, these working groups are really great points of entry into this movement for decarceration that we're seeing happening worldwide. Let's say nationwide. So right now we have working groups that concentrate on bailouts, on fundraising, communications, and post-bail support. So bailouts is basically the system I just talked about. Someone calls us, they get approved. We get the money together to go bail them out. And then post-bail support is like reminding them of their court dates. Recently, we've heard from Katie Blakeman, who is our circuit clerk, that the courts are going to start doing that. I haven't checked up on it, so I don't really know how that works or how successful that is or how much people are working with that right now. So for the time being, the CCBC still works to give people reminders for their court dates. And also just keep in touch if there's any kind of resources we could direct them to. Since we're a coalition, a lot of us work in different parts of the CU activist sphere. So there might be some resources we could get them connected to, or people we could have them talk to if they need help with something specific. Fundraising, of course, if you are a fundraising whiz, that's something that's always necessary. Right now, not as much. Luckily, people have been really responsive to the needs of their community members, especially since early this summer, since the murder of George Floyd, where a lot of bail funds were doing a lot of fundraising at that time. But we would definitely are looking into raising funds for different things that folks who are bailed out and need bail support could use. For instance, like I talked about, the whole someone maybe needing a day or two in a hotel after getting bailed out. And of course, communications. So if you're a social media person, you want to work on social media, that's great. That's useful, but even more useful is answering the phone. So our phone is ringing quite a bit. So if you're someone who's like, yes, I will field phone calls, document, make sure that this person gets help, that's something that we always need help with, is being able to field phone calls and talk with family members, with friends of the person who's interned in our local jail to make sure that person gets out as soon as possible. And yeah, so if you want to keep in touch with us, you could send us an email about something. Champaign County Bailout with little periods between all of it at gmail.com. Our Facebook is just Champaign County Bailout Coalition, and we are CU Bailout on Twitter. Forgot to put this, we have a WordPress site. So if you just search Champaign County Bailout Coalition, you'll see our website as well. But yeah, keep in touch, especially if you would like to volunteer. We have meetings once every 2 weeks. I don't know how you say that, bi-weekly? Yeah. So feel free to join us. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Chibundo. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. If you have any questions, you are welcome to use the question and answer function. It's on the bottom of the screen. It says Q&A. Yeah. Chibundo, I guess my question for you is, aside from the system as a whole, like, what are some of the day-to-day challenges you find in this work?
Well, as I said, as someone who's doing bailout work, of course, we have other jobs and everything. No one's professionalizing in this here. So the day-to-day challenges is really understanding how much care is necessary to be in this work, like not only for yourself, but for the people who are coming to you. You know, you might have a really busy day and you see that there's a phone call and you're like, oh, I can't do all that right now. I can't like respond to this. But that person is trying to get out a friend or a family member who, you know, should get out as soon as possible, shouldn't be there in the first place. So that balance between like making sure that your life is working and everything and providing care for other people in the community is very difficult. But the solution, of course, is to get more community members a part of this so we can all share this caring thing.
Sweet, thanks. So in the chat, we have a question from Pat who asks, Have other states been successful in ending money bail?
I know that there are specific places where people have ended money bail. I'm not actually sure about states. But I know in Jersey, I think money bail has been ended for some time, a couple of years now, and it's worked pretty well there. And I think it was incidental how it got shut down. It was just a funding issue, but it was one of those accidental experiments where this funding issue showed us that a lot of the assumptions we have with money bail that diminished or destroying money bail would make the community less safe didn't happen. So it inspired a lot of folks to kind of replicate that model and inspired us to do what we're doing. So, yeah. One other thing I forgot to mention is that when it comes to money bail affecting marginalized folks more, we didn't really talk about women specifically, but I think it's important because just anecdotally, most of the people who call us to get someone bailed out are women, usually someone's mother, someone's girlfriend, someone's wife, someone's sister, or even a friend who's just a woman. So it's a lot of women doing that work of caring for people, even in their own networks, to make sure they get out of jail. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think that's super important and not entirely surprising when we think about like the responsibility of care when, you know, who that gets put on. That's super interesting. If you are an attendee and you want to ask a question, I don't know how, like if you raise your hand, I can't really allow you to talk, but if you use the Q&A function, we can answer your question. I guess my other question for you while you were talking is, like, have you, so we see that there's been a lot of, like there has been a rise in crime in some states. And so there's been a lot of pushback on movements to defund the police. I'm wondering if you've seen pushback locally on ending money bail.
Yeah. I alluded to it a little bit during the talk, but like when we table, especially at public community events, not so much anymore due to the pandemic, we would sometimes get some really incensed reactions to the fact that we exist. And the incensedness, I don't know how to conjugate that, it does make sense where folks see the jail as something that makes them safe, right? That like, this is the place bad people go and y'all are doing bad things by letting bad people go. Which is why we always talk about the judge could have not given them bail. And if the judge gave them bail, that means that they think they're not a danger to the community. So the only reason they're in there is because they are poor. That is it. And if poverty is what keeps people in prison, or excuse me, incarcerated, that's a problem. Other pushback we've had was, of course, during May, I think late May 31st, June 1st. That was when the event that happened by the mall occurred. And I think 27 people were arrested. That was a very strange time for this county for sure. After that happened, you had like the News Gazette posting everyone's name, like an approximation of their addresses, all these details about their backgrounds and medical histories. It was really, really strange and scary. But yeah, we got money together with huge, huge help from the folks up in Chicago, the Chicago Community Bail Fund, who gave us a good like $56,000 immediately so we could get those people out as soon as possible rather than waiting to drum up all those funds. And we got those folks out, but people were not pleased with us. They were not pleased with us at all. But again, if the judge gave them bail, that means they can be out. And if the bail is something they can't afford, that's a problem, you know, and that's our one and only intervention.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for answering that. So we have a couple more questions. One from Chelsea who's asking, how high are bails typically set in Champaign County, or does it widely vary?
Well, after that May 31st event, we did see like a kind of a huge uptick because before all this went down, our cap was $500. And we made that cap because folks looking at the jail website, you know, day after day saw that usually $500 is what people need to get out. So back in the day, like a year ago, $500 let most people get out of jail. And especially whatever was extra there, families were likely able to raise that extra. But when the May 31st event happened, we were seeing people getting $50,000 bails, which is something that we had never really seen. We've seen $5,000 bails, but $50,000, that was intense. And of course, these are bonds where we just had to pay 10% for someone to get arrested, released on their own recognizance. So that means people need a minimum of $5,000 with which to be released, which is huge. You know, if you look at crimes like across the country, you see that like a $50,000 bail, some people do not get a $50,000 bail from some pretty serious accusations, right? So I would say it does vary quite widely, but after that event, I feel, at least personally, that we've been seeing a lot more high bails, all in the $50,000 range or the $25,000 range. And I'm not quite sure what that's about.
That's awful. And such an absurd amount of money. Yeah, it reminds me of like what you said about how bail money defunds Black communities in Champaign County, I think is a really powerful way to think about that. And especially when you put real numbers like that.
Mm-hmm. Just a little aside with that. So I don't know if everyone was familiar with it, like how some criminal justice discourses have happened in Champaign County over the years, but a couple of years back, jaywalking was a big deal, right? Where people were seeing jaywalking as a problem because for instance, in the North End, which is in Urbana, where the Black community tends to live. I live in the North End, but like in the southern part of the North End, there's not a lot of sidewalks in a lot of places in the North End, especially at this time. Yet people were getting pulled over and arrested for jaywalking and getting tickets. And I think it was Aaron Ammons, don't quote me on it, but I believe at a city council meeting, he mentioned the fact that just these jaywalking tickets and fines and fees related to all those complications that occurred with that, the Black community over the years has been defunded over $1 million. This is a community where there's not, like, this is a food desert. This is a community where people are living. When you look at the what's called wage distribution of Champaign County, you know, you have folks who work around the university and with the university making quite a bit. This is where most of the people making way below the poverty line live. And yet we are funding the criminal justice system here that incarcerates us and kind of farms more money into that system. So, sorry. Yeah.
So we have a question from Serene. Has your involvement in this coalition changed your perception of the prison industrial complex? What have you learned?
That's a big one. That's a big question. Ooh, I guess it changed my perception in the idea that I did not understand how strangely human and soft that system is. For me, it's like, oh, laws are, you know, things, and then something happens and there's like a system that's regimented, that's same for everyone. And it's like, it is the same for everyone, but there's so many weird, squishy ways. Like someone doesn't put, someone at a city building doesn't put the right paperwork in, you're now a criminal, you know, or doesn't put it in time, or something messes up and you don't get mailed when your court date is. There's just so many ways where it's like, you're going to jail. Like how quick the punitive part comes. I mean, we heard a story from someone from up in Chicago, talking about how they got involved in bail work. And they were saying that they got pulled over something, got a ticket, got a summons to appear, totally forgot about it. And then years later get pulled over, and apparently they had a warrant for their arrest for 2 years and ended up having a really difficult time getting out of jail after that. Not as much as a problem here, but in Cook County, so in Chicago, people can be in jail for like months and years. So they stay there for a very, very long time. So yeah, that's part of my answer. But as far as other ways that's made me rethink the criminal justice system is like thinking about how much it's a really social system, how a lot of the folks who are kind of in charge in certain ways are really interconnected, know each other, are friends. It's super disheartening, honestly, super disappointing. But of course, also how strong people's families and communities are to keep with them through sometimes years of litigation and all this stuff to get people out. Like as strong and as like formidable of an issue, you know, just the punitive nature of our criminal justice system is, what's stronger definitely is community response, right? So yeah, thank you for that question.
Thanks, Serene. Our next question is from Carol, and they say, so one of the things I noticed in Governor Pritzker's 7 reform principles for the criminal justice this week is his money bail proposal includes a risk assessment. I know that the Coalition to End Money Bail is against risk assessment in their current form. Could you comment on that?
Yes, of course, and CCBC is as well. So risk assessment we see as a way to kind of obfuscate. Oh my gosh, I typed that word a lot, I swear to you. I just cannot say it right now. Okay, hide as a way to hide racial bias and other biases in the system. So these algorithms, so usually risk assessment is some kind of like computer-based thing that assesses the risk of someone reoffending, of them running away, and so on and so forth, for whether or not they should be released on their own recognizance. And making risk assessment a condition of being released on your own recognizance is problematic because all the data that this computer is being fed, that this algorithm is reproducing, is based off of data that we know is not fair to most marginalized people. You know, if you're looking at risk, and how does a computer understand risk? By looking at the past, looking at past cases, looking at past discretionary judgments about people to decide whether or not they're going to reoffend. And of course, even going, you know, full on, what was that movie with Tom Cruise? And they had like pre-crime or something like that. Minority Report. Yeah. So not trying to get us off topic to talk about Tom Cruise's illustrious career, but that was the whole like fear. That was the fear that was intensifying the drama Minority Report, is the idea of pre-crime. And that's what a risk assessment would do. But since it's a computer and there's an algorithm and there's equations going on, I think people do not understand that statistics, numbers are just a documentation of what has happened rather than some kind of like clear-headed, you know, objective view of what should occur. And of course, when you put them in something like this, like a risk assessment, every statistic becomes an argument. And those arguments can be racist. Those arguments can be discriminatory. And we believe they were going to be. So thank you for that.
So
and
is
hi,
that
Carol. Sorry, I just want to say hi. Hi, Carol.
Yeah, Carol's on it. So does that generally have to do with the overrepresentation of marginalized people within the database itself? Just so I understand.
Yeah. Oh, someone's knocking on my door, but I will answer. They're just going to go home. So yes, overrepresentation of people in the system in the first place. And as far as what kind of, there's also like the lack of transparency about how these algorithms will be coded. Because it's also humans that code these things. Like there's no end to like the humanness in this, like with law. Humans create laws. Humans arrest people for laws. Humans judge other humans about whether or not they're guilty, and sometimes other things. So the human element means that there's so much going on in there. So I'm just afraid, and I think a lot of folks are afraid of the use of computers and algorithms to kind of validate really hegemonic, let me not use that term, problematic ways of thinking and seeing the world and people in general.
Carol adds to that, and also I think risk assessment can include things like ownership. So thinking about, who owns homes, who's been allowed to own homes, right?
Mm-hmm. There's that discussion about good citizenship too. So like the system saying, are you a good citizen? Have you been a good citizen so far? And citizenship can be based on those super problematic things like home ownership, like how, if you've attended school, and all these other things that are completely irrelevant, right, to the case at hand. So you're being judged on this weird respectability computer thing about whether or not you should be free. Mm-hmm. That's just strange.
That's super illuminating. Thank you for breaking that down. Kathleen's asking, what is the governor's position on elimination of cash bail?
So as far as we understand it right now, he's supportive, which is really exciting. From what we've heard, it seems like it's going to be a priority for the legislative year. I think by January, we might hear some more things about it. Of course, this conversation has been a bit slowed down due to the pandemic, which is, understandable. But earlier in the year, we were having the lobby days at Springfield, having a lot of really amazing conversations and webinars and sessions about this. I was going up there with folks from the coalition to go talk to folks who represent us, including our own Carol Ammons, who is also in support of the elimination of cash bail in Illinois. But yeah, he seems supportive. We'll see how it goes. But everything we have heard, textually, verbally, message-wise, has been in support.
Cool. That's great. So another question from Serene. What resources do you recommend for beginners who want to learn more about this work?
Oh, I might have to ask for a breakdown. So as far as this work, do you mean what CCBC is doing? Bail funds in general? Folks working about decarceration, decriminalization, abolition. There's a lot of different, levels of this work that you could get into. But of course, starting small, starting with us, we're here. CCBC is here. There are people in your own community you could definitely start talking to about this, and might help you, direct you to what you're interested in based off of conversation, coming to meetings, and so on and so forth. But I also, of course, suggest the Coalition to End Money Bail website. They have a lot of great resources. CCPF, so the Champaign Community Bond Fund, great resources. And of course, Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice. You could go on those listservs. But I think it's a really good idea to start your research journey rather than with citations that might feel a little disembodied, a little separate from a real life context, starting with the activists themselves who are doing work on the ground and see what they suggest. And also maybe getting involved and seeing what people tell you need to know to do the work as well as you can, and what you think that you need to know to do the work as well as you can. I would suggest do that in collaboration with other folks also doing the work, is what I'm trying to say.
That's awesome. Okay, well, those were all of our questions. Do you have any closing thoughts before we head out?
Closing thoughts. Okay. Well, I don't really have any closing thoughts. I just would like to continuously extend that invitation for folks to work with us and get involved in this issue, this concept in any way that you can. Talk to your friends about it. Talk to your families about it. We are a community, and I think we would all like that if something happened to us, people in the community would care. That it's not just our personal friends, our personal family members, our personal networks, but people in the community see something happening to someone in the community and sees that as a problem for for all of us, right? So just urging y'all to be, I'm not gonna say more community-minded, but as community-minded as you can be, and including what happens to marginalized people in your community, right? So a lot of things have been happening here in Champaign, Urbana, and Champaign County, period. Definitely just start looking into it. What's going on? How are people taking care of each other? What do people need? And how can you contribute? That's it. Yeah.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I just dropped the link to the WordPress website in the chat for our attendees if you want to check that out. Like Chibundo said, there's also a Facebook page and email. Thank you again for your time. I hope you enjoyed this experience as much as the rest of us, and have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Thank you for having me, YMCA. Bye.